Well, excuse me. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a Soothkeep live stream. Sorry for the cheesy intro tonight. We have migrated over to StreamYard so that we can very easily broadcast on Rumble and X and Facebook and Substack and other venues, as well as on YouTube. And somehow I cannot figure out how to get my introductory video out of my old venue and into Streamlabs. Into StreamYard here. So I'll probably figure it out in a day or two, but it'll take a little while. Folks, if you have good audio and video, please give me a thumbs up, and then we're going to get ready to rock and roll with this subject tonight, the blood moons. So let me bring up my notes here. I've been looking forward to doing this. I got about a half a dozen different Rapture topics that have been on my mind lately. One of the ones that comes right to the top of my mind right now is the blood moons, simply because there's been a whole spate of blood moon rapture dating theories coming out, mostly associated with the upcoming Purim, but also any potential blood moon in the future. Let's start by asking the question, what is a blood moon? Folks, the blood moon is simply a total lunar eclipse. That's all it is. It's just a popular name for a total lunar eclipse. There's nothing distinct between it and a lunar eclipse. It is a total solar eclipse. The lunar eclipse happens when the Earth gets directly between the sun and the moon. That's what it is. So you got the sun is on one half of the face of the Earth, and the exact opposite face of the Earth, you have the moon. So the light of the sun is blocked by the Earth from getting to the moon, and this is what brings out that darkish, blood reddish moon. Can vary a little bit depending on the circumstances. Can be here and there, sometimes a little pinkish, can be a little orangish, sometimes a little brownish, but it's in the red spectrum, typically blood red. Now, another thing that people have to understand, you can't have a blood moon unless there is a total lunar eclipse. Again, the blood moon is a lunar eclipse. And someone asks, are questions allowed? Absolutely. Occasionally I will spot a question live in the chat stream, and I will try and get to it live during the chat. But most of the time, the questions are going to be gathered by the moderators and sent to me. And then after the live stream, we will deal with the questions. And typically we get a good mix of questions that are based immediately on the subject matter at hand, and then some that are related, and then some that are just all over the map on Bible prophecy. So there are a couple times of the year when blood moons frequently line up with Jewish feasts. For instance, Passover and Sukkoth, or the Feast of Booths. Now, the reason for this, it's actually very simple. In theory, these feasts are going to be 15 days after the beginning of the month. So they're going to be 15 days into the month. And that brings us to the full moon. And that's why occasionally we have a feast and a blood moon, or the feast and the full moon lining up. Well, there's a problem, though, that we're facing with the blood moon theory of the rapture. And let me just point out that for the last, let's say 12, 13 years, there's been a whole bunch of theories that have been put out on trying to associate blood moons with the rapture. The first folks that really popularized this concept was Mark Blitz in the 2013 to 2014 era. There were a few other Bible teachers that were associated with him, but he's the one that first brought it out. A few others popularized it in their books. The theory was that there was going to be a tetrad of blood moons. That's 4 blood moons in the 2014 to 2015 stretch of time. That's a lot of blood moons in one short period of time. And some of these blood moons were close to Jewish feasts. And the theory was put forth that because we had 4 blood moons in a very short period of time, some of them were associated with Jewish feasts. This implied that we were at the end times, and that the end times weren't a long ways in the future. They were like right now. Well, folks, fast forwards 12 years, where are we at? We're in 2026, and that theory was not correct. And every year since then, there's been blood moon theories that come up and try and associate the rapture with blood moons, or associate the tribulation with blood moons, or associate the last days in some kind of a vague, mystical way with blood moons. Folks, if you stop and think about it, we have had an average of 2 blood moons every year for the last 2,000 years. It's just a normal lunar eclipse. That's all it is. So we basically had about 4,000 blood moons since the cross. Now, if you stop and think about it, how in the world can these blood moons be definitive signs that we're in the last days? You might as well say that that the winter equinox is, the winter solstice is a sign of the last days. The winter solstice only happens once a year. It happens less often than a blood moon. So now what do you do with that? How about the summer solstice? It just happens just once a year. If it's legitimate to say that blood moons are a sign of the last days, then the summer solstice and the winter solstice are signs of the last days. You could make northern light fantastic northern light shows signs of the last days. We need to be careful with this kind of stuff. Now, in our day, the blood moon theory is popularized by people like Jonathan Cahn. Personally, I am very uncomfortable using things like the blood moons, any kind of eclipse crossing, any of this kind of signs in the heavens as signs of the last times. And why would I be uncomfortable? Because, folks, these signs have been happening for decades and centuries and millennia without saying that it's the last time. So now, why would all of a sudden they be speaking the last times now? Now, the most recent theory is that we're going to have a blood moon on Purim on March 3rd, 2026. And this is indicative that the tribulation is near and the rapture is near. But this raises a very important question. If the last 2,000 or 3,000 blood moons did not actually bring the end of the age, why would this blood moon bring the end of the age? I would also point out, folks, I think we need to consider this. People are saying this is a sign of the tribulation, sign of the last days. This blood moon that's associated with Purim is not going to be visible in Jerusalem or Israel. Is barely the very tail end of it is going to be visible in the very far end of Iran. That's it. It's going to be easy, and that's just the penumbra of it. The actual center of it, the core of it, is visible in North America. Now, and I also think it's not significant that we've supposedly had blood moons and 3 Purims in a row. It's just going to happen from time to time. Now, so here's someone else. Whoops, I'm on my laptop, my Macintosh laptop, and somehow if I go like 10 minutes without touching my laptop pad or my keys, it scrolls. It just goes black on me, and so then I'll have to come back in. But I did see the question in the live stream chat here about whether or not the 3 blood moons in a row on Purim have any sign for America. Folks, if No, no. I mean, if 3 blood moons on Purim were assigned to anybody, it would have to be assigned to Israel. The physical signs that are distinct miracle type signs pertain to Israel. If there's any validity in astronomical signs, they pertain to Israel. They're signs to Israel. So the woman in the heavens was assigned to Israel of the birth of the Messiah. The man-child sign is going to be a sign to Israel. So the rapture of the church, folks, is going to be a sign to Israel. It will be, this is God using the church to make Israel jealous. And at the time that the church is raptured, that's going to be a beautiful picture for Israel. So anyway, let me move on here. You folks know that I regularly challenge these dating theories. I regularly challenge the blood moons and the eclipses and the eclipse crossings. And I'll try, for instance, with the blood moons, I try and give some biblical and common sense reasons why blood moons have nothing to do with the timing of the rapture. Now, this is what's interesting about it. When I go down this path, I will share some objective reasons, challenging supposedly objective reasons why blood moons have nothing to do with the rapture. Now, what I find interesting is that when I pose these challenges and people say, well, I think that the blood moons are signs, and I'll give verses from the Bible why they can't be signs. I'll give common sense observations why they can't be signs. And the response I get is not objective. It's anger. It's frustration. People write me nasty emails saying I'm unloving and I'm uncharitable and I absolutely have no idea what the Bible teaches. They rant on me and rail on me. Now, if we were really in an iron sharpens iron environment and we were having a real conversation over whether or not blood moons are valid, someone would say they are, and I would give my reasons why they're not. And then if they were being objective, they would challenge my exegesis, challenge my handling, give me facts, give me observations. We would have an objective conversation, go back and forth until we either concluded that both of us have an apparently equal pile of facts, and then therefore neither of us know enough about the subject to make a decision, or it become obvious that one of us have a big pile of facts, the other one has almost no facts, and someone would have to retreat. But there is no iron sharpens iron like that. When you bring forth objective argument and the other side refuses to be objective and immediately goes subjective, goes off on your character, goes and accuses your character and refuses to deal objectively. To me, that's just a sign that somebody kind of senses inside they know they're wrong and they don't want to admit they're wrong. Now, I told you that a lot of people have gone off on me on the blood moons, and I got a letter. Because I did a post a couple days ago, maybe a week ago, on the blood moons. Got a lot of positive feedback, but I got some really negative feedback. And for instance, I got a letter from a gal in South America, and I'm not going to give you her name or anything that might identify her, but I am just going to share some of what she wrote here. So let me search this out here. Forgot to pull it up first. Okay, here's the email, and I'll pull it up, and they pointed to my comment. It says, "Attention, Lee Brainerd." And they pointed to my comment that states, "A biblical response to blood moon speculation." And she wrote, "I refer to your comments saying," and then she quotes me, "Blood moons are an interesting phenomenon. Of that there is little doubt. But unstable men lacking deep foundation exploit them for sensational theories and predictions. I am highly skeptical that blood moons are signs of wars or that they have anything to do with the timing of the rapture. And here are a few facts that must be taken into consideration. And then I gave some observations. Now, what's interesting is she sends me a list of verses and she says, the following scriptures support and mention the handiwork of God, sun, moon, and stars. So your statement above is an incorrect statement and you are refuting and denying scripture. Now, she sent me not one passage in the Bible that mentions the specific blood moon phenomenon that we're talking about. She didn't send me any passage from the Bible that mentions any kind of astronomical phenomenon that belongs in the same category as blood moon. What she did send me was a string of verses, and we're going to look at them. But she sent me a string of verses that cover weather watching. They cover timekeeping, and they cover the actual day of the Lord, the day that the Lord sets foot on earth. So let's look at these verses that she sent me. The first one is Matthew 16:3. And there we read, it will be stormy today, for the sky is red and threatening. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times. So this is talking about looking at weather phenomenon that's local in our local heavens, in the local sky. And you're reading local short-term signs to determine local short-term weather. Folks, watching the changing signs of the weather in the local area has absolutely nothing to do with signs in the heavens that prognosticate the last days or that can help us date the tribulation or the rapture. They're completely unrelated. I want you to think about this. When we're looking at short-term weather signs, we're looking at stuff that lasts only a few hours or a few days. You know, you're looking at mare's tail clouds or mackerel scale clouds. You're looking at cumulonimbus clouds. You're looking at cloud patterns. You're looking at red sunrise or red sunset. You know, red sky in morning, sailors take warning. Red sky at night, sailors delight. This is talking about short-term weather. You see certain kind of cloud patterns rolling in, you know you're going to have rain tonight. You see certain kinds of cloud patterns rolling in, like the big clouds with the big dimples or the big, looks like golf balls hanging underneath, you know that you've got a massive storm pulling in that could drop heavy hail, and it could be the kind of clouds that would generate a tornado, a funnel cloud. So, but this is short-term weather stuff, and it's completely unrelated to signs like eclipses and blood moons. There's some very big differences here. Think about this. When you're talking about eclipses, they can be predicted decades or centuries ahead of time. Now, it's complicated math. Probably in my entire audience, there might be one or two people that know how to do the math to calculate things like blood moons, lunar eclipses, solar eclipses, and etc. But anybody that's had any experience in the outdoors can look up in the clouds and look at the signs and predict the weather. And sometimes you do better than the guys on TV that predict the weather. So anyway, I don't think it's legitimate to quote a passage on reading the clouds, which basically says if you can read the clouds, then you should be able to interpret the signs of the times. And compare that to eclipses. When what the Lord was talking about was not signs in the heavens. He wasn't comparing the signs of the weather with signs in the heavens. He was comparing the signs that were coming in the heavens with the signs that were happening here on earth, with the geopolitical arrangements, with the Messiah feeling his signs down here on earth. So I think there's no comparison here. Well, let's move on to the next one. Genesis 1:14. And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. Here, this is talking about timekeeping. And I want you to notice when it's talking about timekeeping, it's talking about days and years, separating day from night, separating days, separating years, and seasons, spring, summer, fall, and winter. Those were based on the lunar cycles. You had the spring equinox, the fall equinox, the winter solstice, the summer solstice. So this was all based on the motion of the moon, was based on sunrise and sunset, and was based on the sun or the Earth's journey around the sun, which takes a year. So these class of signs, folks, they are very consistent. They're fixed intervals. Sunrise to sunrise is a fixed interval. Lunar cycles are a fixed interval. Prior to 713 BC, the lunar cycle was exactly 30 days long, not 5 minutes longer, not 5 minutes shorter. After the calamity of 713 BC, the lunar cycle was switched to 29 and a half days and a little change. So this is why the Jewish calendar has to alternate back and forth between a 30-day month and a 29-day month, back and forth, until it falls about 11 and a half days behind every year. And 7 times in a 19-year cycle, they have to add Adar 2, an extra 30-day month, to the calendar. But this class of signs that are given to us in heaven, these are for regular timekeeping. They're fixed intervals. This isn't talking at all about things like the eclipses, lunar eclipses or solar eclipses or comets or asteroids, which could be short period comets, long period comets, could be asteroids with elliptical orbits. It's not talking about this class of stuff, which don't come on fixed intervals that we can use for keeping time. They do have at times fixed intervals. Some, like a long period comet, might have a 120-year interval or a 79-year interval, but it's not really useful for keeping time for us in the standard way that we have minutes, hours, days, months, and years. And we use the sun and the moon for these timekeeping, which is very consistent. So when you understand the difference here, now you can use the appearance of a comet and put it in your history so that it helps solidify where that comet appeared in history. You can talk about a king being born before or after such and such an eclipse, and that's very useful too for record keeping. But as far as keeping track of time, it's not very useful at all. So when we look at Genesis 1:14, this is the creation purpose, folks, for what the heavens were given to us. Now, right now, there are things happening in the heavens that pertain to judgment. I mean, the book of Revelation is filled with comets and asteroids slamming into earth. It's got several terrifying signs in the heavens. But the creation purpose is not talking about these kind of signs. The creation purpose for the universe is simply that the universe is capable of measuring regular intervals of time of such vast extent that the universe can measure the vastest amounts of time. Right now, a year is the Earth's journey around the sun, but we're going to measure our sun's journey around the galaxy. We are going to measure our galaxy's journey around the galaxy cluster. We're going to measure our galaxy cluster's journey around the supercluster, and it's just going to keep going. The universe is a gigantic clock capable of measuring the vastest amounts of time, folks. So the creation purpose of the universe is to keep track of time. The creation purpose of the universe is not signs of judgment. When we come to the end of this age, and we're going to have a bunch of judgment, then we're going to have the millennium and one final judgment, and we go beyond the millennium. The creation purpose mentioned in Genesis 1:14 is going to march on for millions of years, billions of years, trillions of years, quadrillions of years, without any reference whatsoever to judgment, to signs of the times, to the signs that say the end times. There won't be any. There might be cool things that happen in the heavens, but they won't be signs of judgment. So at any rate, we looked at the first two, weather watching. It really doesn't correlate to signs of judgment. You can compare watching the weather to watching the signs of the times, but the signs of weather change, arguing for those, does not argue for looking to blood moons or eclipse crossings as signs of judgment. There's nothing in there that would indicate that. The same thing with Genesis 1:14. In fact, I'm going to give you a translation of Genesis 1:14 I think will really help you. The best translation takes the first "and" there as even. In Greek regularly, Indo-European languages regularly, the word "and" is sometimes best translated even. So when you're translating, your first go-to is "and," your second is "also," and then your third is "even." If "and" doesn't fit, try "also." If "also" doesn't fit, try "even." This is true for Greek. This is true for Hebrew. So put that in your Greek and Hebrew toolbox, and it'll be very helpful. So in Genesis 1:14, we read about the signs, and let them be for signs, even for seasons and days and years. He's just talking about generic timekeeping. He's not talking about signs of coming judgment. He can't be talking about signs of coming judgment, folks. This is still in the garden before the fall. There's no fall. There's no curse. This is the creation purpose that's under purview here. And the signs that he gave us in the heavens, they're for counting days. They're for counting seasons, spring, summer, winter, and fall, or planting and harvest. They're for counting the years. That's what he's talking about. That's all that he's talking about. That summarizes what he's talking about. And to read signs of judgment here is to take one definition of the word oath, which is used here for signs, and enforce that definition into the passage against this context. It just, folks, this is the creation purpose, and in eternity, it's going to be running for billions and trillions of years, and it won't have any reference there to signs of judgment. This is the creation purpose. And if it doesn't have, because it's a creation purpose, it doesn't have purpose for signs of judgment now. Well, let's go back to some of these other passages. We have Psalm 104:19. He made the moon to mark the seasons, and the sun knows its time for setting. So here we have a verse that this is a verse she quoted me as proof that we should be looking to blood moons. But the verse doesn't say anything about blood moons or eclipses or eclipse crossings. It's just simply talking about the normal lunar cycle and the fact that we count months to calculate the seasons. There's 3 months between winter and spring, 3 months between spring and summer, 3 months between summer and fall, 3 months between fall and winter. And that's all it's talking about. He made the moon to mark the seasons, to mark the months and to mark the seasons, and the sun knows it's time for setting. So nothing here on the blood moons. She also sent me Psalm 81:3. Sound the ram's horn at the new moon, and when the moon is full, on the day of our festival. Now, very interesting. This is just the normal lunar cycle for the months. Sound the ram's horn at the new moon, and when the moon is full on the day of our festival. So the new moon and the full moon, the day of our festival. She also sent me Luke 21, 25, and 26. Now, the rest of these passages, we've already looked at discerning the weather, and we've looked at keeping time. Now we're going to look at the day of the Lord, the day the Lord descends from heaven to earth. So I want to point out here, she sends me Luke 21, 25, and 26. There will be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, and on the earth distress of nations and perplexity because of the roaring of the sea and the waves. Luke 21, 25, and 26. Folks, this is not talking about a phenomenon that occurs on average twice a year for the last 2,000 years. This is talking about a phenomenon that's never occurred in our history in the church age. And if it had a parallel, it hasn't had a parallel for well over 2,000 years, for deep into the Iron Age, if not all the way back to the Bronze Age. This is a phenomenon where something is going to wreak havoc in our solar system. And we are going to see the sun literally turn black. We're going to see the moon literally turn blood. Not for a minute or 2 or 5 minutes in a lunar eclipse, folks. It's going to turn blood and stay blood for hours. It's going to involve the stars rolling across the sky like words on a scroll rolling across. It's going to involve at the same time the sea raging in massive waves, like in an apocalyptic movie. Why is all this going to be the case? This is going to be the case because some gigantic body, like a planet or some insanely massive comet or a brown dwarf star, something is going to come blowing through our solar system and throw everything out of whack. And this is going to happen on one day. Now, here's another interesting thing. On this day, folks, whatever this blood moon sign is, it at the same time, the exact same time, the sun turns black. The stars roll across the sky at a fast pace, like you're rolling words on a scroll. The planets are going to be shaken out of their normal orbits, and they're going to be wreaking havoc. There's going to be massive earthquakes and tidal waves here on Earth. Now, since we don't see these other things, we are not seeing a biblical blood moon. I want you to just bear that in mind. So we have a similar passage in Joel chapter 2:31, which is quoted in Acts 2:20. The sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. This is the day of the Lord. And so in Revelation 6:12, we read about the moon becoming like blood. In fact, let me go read Revelation 6:12. I think it'd be very good to read this passage. I looked, and he opened the sixth seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood. And the stars of heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree drops its late figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind. Then the sky receded like a scroll when it is rolled, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place. Folks, we are not seeing this blood moon now. The blood moons that we see have absolutely nothing to do with this day, other than the fact that they happen in the same universe. Otherwise, there's no relationship except the superficial thing, that the color of red. That's it. Matthew 24:29. Let me read that one too. Matthew 24:29. And there we read, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. The powers of the heavens, as I mentioned before, are the planets. When you're looking up in the sky, you see the sun, the moon, the stars, and the visible planets. That's what this is talking about. So the ancients worship the powers of the heavens. They worship the 5 visible planets along with the sun and the moon. The 5 visible planets with the sun and the moon were the 7 main gods of the pantheon around the world. And sometimes they'd include the earth as the 8th, and they would include some of the major constellations for the minor gods. And sometimes a single star like Sirius, which is the dog star. But at any rate, we're talking about signs that happen on a very definitive day in the very definitive future. So we've looked at weather watching, timekeeping, and the day of the Lord. None of these passages are talking about blood moons. None of them are talking about phenomena that are related to blood moons. None of them are talking about normal eclipses, normal blood moons, normal eclipse crossings. They're not talking about even comets or asteroids as we normally think of them. And so there's nothing in these passages that justify using the blood moons for rapture dating theories or tribulation dating theories. What I want to encourage you with is that if there are things that we can use to date the rapture, not to date the rapture in the sense of we can come up with a week or a day or even a year, but that we can date it in the sense of knowing the season. That's about all we can do. And I want you to think about knowing the season, kind of holding it loosely, because the fact of the matter is, some of the brightest minds in evangelicalism from the 1980s to the present day, you can throw Chuck Missler in there. You can throw a lot of brilliant prophecy teachers in there, had conceptions that the rapture might happen in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, 2010s, or in the 2020s. And what have we done? We've been wrong every time. And some of the bright men from the 80s and 90s were decades off. So when we recognize that we're in the season, we need to hold this conception loosely. I think that we're deep enough into prophetic convergence that we could easily go up in the rapture this year. We might go up tonight or this month. But we also have to understand that we've jumped the gun over and over and over again for decades, and we might not go up for a few more years. It might go longer than any of us anticipate. Certainly that longer than any of us would desire. So just simply hold the concept. We're in the season and hold it relatively loosely. Don't get married to it has to be in the next 2 years. Don't get married to it has to be this year, because you're probably going to disappoint yourself. And if we're not married to that, we're not going to be disappointed if it does happen this year or next year, and it could. So anyway, the kind of signs that we want to lean on that actually are really helpful is generic convergence. Don't lend themselves to these cool date setting theories. They're not mathematics. They're not the year of the cross. They're not the 2,000 years that we're adding. They're not a 6,000 year theory. There has nothing to do necessarily with Jewish feasts or Jewish dates like Tish B'Av or Purim or Hanukkah or anything of that nature. It's simply generic prophetic convergence. And by that, I mean things like geopolitical chessboard setting. So we see Turkey, Russia, and Iran coming together. We see a growing coalition against the fractured Roman Empire. We see the Roman Empire kind of starting to gel in some ways. It's a little bit more difficult to determine who's going to ultimately lead it. Is Europe going to lead it? Or is America going to lead it? Or we're going to see something that might catch us all by surprise. Whatever it is, it's going to be the Roman Empire. We see anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, anti-Jewishness just running like wildfire through the entire planet. Now, what's interesting about these kind of signs, this triumvirate of Russia and Turkey and Iran is ultimately going to come together for the Gog and Magog battle, where they're going to invade Israel. So you can expect to see this coming together more and more. Russia's got to wrap up whatever she's doing in Europe. Iran has to be finished with the situation she's in, whether she gets beat up and recovers or whether somehow she escapes from the skin of her teeth and Trump is the first one to flinch. Something's going to happen here. But either way, it's going to help forward the Gog and Magog situation. It's going to lay a foundation for it. It's going to kind of set up a time of peace. Now, we have different theories on how this peace for Israel is going to come about. It won't be real, genuine, lasting peace. It's going to be a faux peace. It's going to be a superficial peace. It's going to give her breathing space for a while, but it's going to deceive her, lull her to sleep, and leave her unprepared in many ways for this massive coming invasion. This anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, it's running through the world. This is another amazing sign. This is really accelerated. It's going to come to a head with, not with Gog and Magog, but with the Antichrist in Armageddon, when all the nations of the earth are gathered against Israel. So we can expect this to continue to accelerate. I think this anti-Semitism is one of the greatest signs of the age that we're close to the rapture. When you look at evangelicals drifting away from dispensationalism and embracing full-blown anti-dispensationalism, the amillennialism, the preterism, they're railing and saying that this Israel that we see now has nothing to do with the Israel of the Bible. Some of them say they're real Jews, but there's so much in their unbelief that God doesn't honor them. Others say they're not even Jews. They came from Kazakhstan or some other Stan nation, or they're just a bunch of Europeans and Africans and Middle Easterners, and they're not really Jews. You've got all kinds of tales like this. Folks, let me just answer one point here. We don't even have to go to the DNA to prove this, okay? The Bible clearly taught that God was going to bring Israel back to the land in the last days. God was going to do it. Now, there's no way under the sun the devil is going to go fulfilling scripture like this. So if Israel is back in the land, you can rest assured that God brought real Jews back to the land and that it was God that brought them back to the land. There's no way under the sun the devil's going to say, oh, I'm going to fulfill this verse for God. No, he doesn't play that way. So we can trust that the people in the land are Jews that God gathered. And it's irrelevant if 5% or 10% or even 25% there that think they're Jews don't have any real Jewish blood. It's irrelevant. The vast majority of them are real Jews, have Jewish DNA. They're there because God gathered them. That's what matters. And so this anti-Semitism, this railing against Israel is a sign of the times. God's brought Israel back. God, and the whole bringing them back is Zionism, and this growing, recoiling hatred for Zionism is a sign of the times. Now, another sign of the times I think is really, really valuable is simply the rise that we see of robots and AI and computers and quantum computing. This stuff is going to quickly dominate our life. In the last year, I've gotten to the point where I almost hate going online anymore with a Google search. I used to love Google searching for stuff. And now, and someone told me how I think they told me that I can get rid of Google AI. I think they said I had to type in -AI and it would be gone. I haven't tried it yet. Hopefully it works. But I hate Google AI results. I hate Chat GPT results. I have never yet seen a summary that they have presented of any question I asked that was right. It was always just this mishmash gathering of real facts and fake facts and misinformation and people's opinions. And if they gather the opinions of 4 people that are wrong and they summarize it, then the whole thing is wrong. And AI has absolutely no way to determine whether it's right or wrong. They just gather opinions. And I hope none of you will use AI in a careless way like that. AI can be helpful to help you find some sources to use, give you source material that give you directions to find source material, but don't rely on its conclusions. That's a big, big mistake. I think as mankind learns to rely on using AI, they're flushing their brain down the potty. They're ceasing to be the rational human beings that God designed them to be. Folks, we are supposed to be living sacrifices, giving a reasonable or rational sacrifice. You can't give a reasonable or rational sacrifice of your time, your energy, or your money if you don't use your God-given reason on facts and observations and data in the things around you. Anyway, that's my little rant for the night. We're also facing things like digital ID, digital currencies, digital passports, digital social grading. This stuff is coming lickety-split down the path. This, again, is a huge, huge, huge sign of the times. Now, I'm not going to tell you that we have to be out of here before this stuff comes. I literally do not believe that. If that was true, the church should have been raptured 15 or 20 years ago, because there are parts of the world that already have digital ID and digital facial recognition, and they're using stuff like that. There's already places that have been using facial recognition on digital systems for over a decade. There's already places been using digital currency in its first test stages for a long time. So, folks, the stuff is already here. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if the church is going to be here when this is completely rolled out and we're all languishing. It was bad enough when we moved into checks and credit cards. And now we're moving into the age of digital banking, cashless society. I don't enjoy it, but I don't fear it either. It's ugly. It's symptomatic of what's coming down the path. But folks, we got glorious days in front of us. We have an amazing future in front of us. Think about streets paved with gold. Think about living and dwelling in a city wherein righteousness dwells. There's no bogus social media. There's no media moguls preaching leftist Marxist lies. It's just a wonderful situation, full of fellowship, full of the Spirit of God, full of righteousness, full of holiness. I'm looking forward to that day. Another one that we're facing is, I mentioned the tracking. We're being tracked all the time, folks. It's going to get worse. Right now, you go to the airport, and most airports are now using facial recognition. You don't even have, sometimes I don't even have to show my passport or my driver's license. All they do is they just scan my face, and the information, because I checked in, is already online. They're doing retinal scans. It's pretty amazing what's going on here. In some ways, the technology is actually kind of cool. But what's painful about it is this is going to be used by Big Brother government to control and manipulate people and force them down paths they do not want to go. And the longer we're down here on earth, the more painful it's going to get. They are going to invade our privacy, but worse than invading our privacy, folks, they're going to start forcing choices upon us. Oh, if you don't have the right political platform, you can't go to this school. Oh, if you don't have the right political platform, you can't work for this company. Oh, if you don't have the right political platform, we can't allow you to have a bank account. Now that's going to be painful, because if you don't have a bank account, everything is digital, folks. You won't be able to buy or sell. So if we start seeing the first of this, it's going to be ugly. I can grant you that. But folks, we're still going home. We may not go home as soon as we'd like. We may not go home as fast as we'd like. We may see a whole lot more of the crap fest down here than we want to see. But you know what? The deeper the crap down here, folks, the sweeter the smell of New Jerusalem is going to be. The sweeter the embrace of Jesus in the clouds is going to be. I want you to start thinking about it from this perspective so that you don't get too frustrated and discouraged by all the ugly we're going through. Because someday, whether you're knee deep in the ugly, or waist deep in the ugly, or chest deep in the ugly, or the ugly has crept up to your nose and you can barely breathe anymore, we're going up. We're going up to see the end of ugly and the beginning of sweet everlasting. And I can hardly wait. So anyway, folks, I gave you some food for thought here. I'll just wrap it up here and we'll move into the questions. I don't think it's legitimate to use passages talking about reading the signs of the weather to justify looking to blood moons for dating theories. I don't think it's legitimate to look to the passages like Genesis 1:14 that give us the principle of timekeeping and use them as justifications for looking to using things like blood moons and eclipse crossings as signs of coming judgment and the coming rapture. And I don't think it's legit to use the passages on the coming day of the Lord that have the signs in the heavens, the sun, the moon, the stars, and the planets, and use them as justification for blood moons and eclipses. Very different phenomena. All three of those classes are different than the class of things like blood moons and eclipses and eclipse crossings. So if you're going to make an argument from the Bible to use eclipses and eclipse crossings and blood moons as signs for judgment, you need to find two things. And maybe I've overlooked it. And if you want to send me stuff, I'm more than happy to look at it. But you need to show that there is at least a passage which illustrates doing that, if not a command to do so. So you need to have something, a picture of it or a command of it. Okay, thank you. Someone says if I go to display and brightness, I can find auto lock and set to never while you're doing the program. Oh, thank you for that. I'll have to remember that. Auto lock and never. All right. So when we look at the difference between weather watching, timekeeping, and the day of the Lord, and we compare that to signs like blood moons and eclipses and eclipse crossings, it's really mind-boggling to me how anyone can confuse the blood moons that are in the day of the Lord with the common phenomena that we call the blood moons now. At any rate, I'll quit beating that dog for a little while. Maybe I'll wait another month or two before I beat on it again. But I just want to encourage you folks to be more biblical. And, you know, I know that young believers are going to make mistakes. Old believers can make mistakes. All believers can make mistakes. So I'm not really encouraging us to beat up on people that hold these kind of things or have considered them. I look back at my past. I look at some of the things I believed and some of the things I considered when I was a young believer. And some of it's embarrassing. And some of it was, well, I guess all young believers make those kind of mistakes. But theoretically, we're supposed to grow in maturity, become mature in our beliefs, mature in our convictions, mature in our discernment, and move beyond those kind of things. All right, let's move into the questions. So let me pull up Midjourney here and go to the questions. Go to Soothkeep and okay. And it's the 24th, so I got the right questions here. So here's the first question. I want to move this sideways a little bit so I can read my questions better. All right. Can Satan know or suspect us being caught up? And that is why he is using the alien abduction theory. Yeah, I absolutely do believe that. I completely 100% believe that Satan believes in the pre-trib rapture. That's really the best explanation for why we've had this new age theory for decades, that a time was going to come when all the bad apples in the world, all the bad karma in the world is just kind of vaporized by the good karma. Now that's why we have the alien abduction theory that's being disseminated by Illuminati type circles, deep state circles, secret society circles, being disseminated even by folks in NASA. The theory that the aliens are going to take all the bad apples out of Earth and take them away. Sometimes the theory says they'll take them out and destroy them. Sometimes the theory says they'll take them out and re-educate them. Some of the theories say that they come and they take out all their allies, their secret allies, and they take them out of the world. But here's another theory, which I recently heard of. Another theory, and I don't really quite, I'd have to read up more on this, and I don't understand what mechanism is taking them out of the world. But there is a theory now called the reverse rapture. And this theory, folks, this is mind-boggling, it's mind-blowing. It's one of the latest and coolest and hottest conspiracy theories. And that is that when the rapture happens, only the Nephilim, the bad seed, goes up. Now, of course, this is something I think is going to really appeal to the post-millennialists, to the New Apostolic Reformation people. I can see them getting all hot and bothered over this. Boy, this really goes along with what they're teaching. And I hope we don't see a lot of people in the pre-trib camp succumbing to this kind of garbage and going against the pre-trib rapture theory. But I wouldn't be surprised if some do. It's amazing to me watching young dispensationalists forsake the dispensational system point by point by point until they're basically not dispensational anymore. Is the war we are about to enter a prophetic one? If so, which one? I do not believe the war that we're seeing on the immediate horizon, the potential war between the U.S. and Israel on the one side and Iran and who knows who else on the other side. I do not believe it's immediately or directly a prophetic war. The prophetic wars in the future, of course, we got the whole Damascus issue, which I think is probably associated with Psalm 83, but that's my opinion. That might not be right. We have the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war, of course, the Psalm 83 war. Those may be two events. They may be one event. I think they're one. I think they're two aspects of one big coalition coming against Israel. So we've got those kind of wars. We have the war the Antichrist wages when he comes to power, where he takes out 3 of the 10 kings that are going to be in association with him. So he has to win 3 by force. I don't think that what we're seeing set up before us is any of those wars. I think if we're going to see a war here, it's a stage setting war. And folks, there's no guarantee that we are going to see a war here. Of course, I can't help it. I would love to see nasty Iran get beat up so that the good Iranians can have a little bit of freedom here in the last days. But this is all in God's hands. We don't know for sure if Trump is going to flinch or Trump is going to blow a stack and order the invasion, or if Trump is going to be rational and order an invasion. We don't know. How in the world can we know? I don't think any of us know his mind. Now, maybe some of his closest allies have a good idea. I wouldn't be surprised. But this is beyond me. It's probably beyond most of you. And war could set the stage for Israel's peace that leads to Ezekiel 38 and 39. And peace here, some last minute deal, could also lead to a false peace. And I don't think either one is a slam dunk. I don't think war is a slam dunk. I don't think peace is a slam dunk. I think we're just sitting on pins and needles waiting to see what happens. But either theory, either outcome could easily be used of both God and the devil to lay this foundation of false peace for Israel. It just depends upon how the outcome is. But no matter what happens, this is the direction it has to go. It has to go in the direction of Iran being together with Turkey and Russia and their whole circle of allies for the Gog and Magog invasion of Israel. Does God Almighty favor Democrats or Republicans? I love this question. If you're here, well, this is here. Okay, let me put it this way. If you're talking old-fashioned JFK type Democrats and Republicans, I think God probably views them about equal. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. If you're talking modern, Marxist, leftist, ridiculous, nutcase liberals who hate God and who hate the Bible, and they're not even trying to use the Bible in a half reasonable way, then obviously God probably prefers Republicans over Democrats. But you got to understand that the real issue that God divides men up on is not politics. That's a secondary issue for him. The primary issue is, are you born again or are you not born again? That's the way that God divides the whole world up. That's how he's going to deal with them at the second coming when he divides the sheep and goats. Are you born again? Are you not born again? And the fact of the matter is, let me add this. When it comes to the New World Order, folks, it's not the Republicans versus the New World Order. If you go down that path, you are making a big mistake. The Republican Party in America is not opposed to the New World Order. Now, you might find a few individuals that are, but the Republican Party in general is pro-New World Order as long as America is leading the way. If the New World Order is led by, molded by, dominated by America, they are all for the New World Order. Really, what we got going on in the world right now is there's at least 7 or 8 versions of the New World Order that are dominating. This is like a massive game of King of the Hill. You got China has its own version of the New World Order. Russia has its version of the New World Order. The Vatican has its version of the New World Order. Islam has its version of the New World Order. America has several versions of it. We've got people in America that are the Republican type, which want an America First New World Order. You've got many Democrats who kind of want a European First New World Order. Europe wants their version of the New World Order. You have some in America here of the liberal stamp seem to want a China First New World Order. So America's kind of divided on this. But all these versions, plus you have the technocrat version of the New World Order. All these versions are competing and vying for domination of this hill. And who's ever going to win this, folks, is going to be whoever comes up on top with AI and quantum computing and high-tech military and high-tech world-leading technology. Whoever gets this stuff is going to dominate the whole world. They're going to be king of the hill. Now, ultimately, I think China doesn't have a snowball's chance in you-know-where to win. I don't think Russia has a snowball's chance in you-know-where to win. The Vatican has no chance at all. Islam is going to get absolutely crushed in the Gog and Magog battle, along with Russia and all of our allies. They don't have a chance. Who's going to come out on top here? Well, we know who the 3 top players are. The 3 top players are Europe and the extended Europe, which is their former colonies, America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and then the technocrats, which are largely American, but include some folks in Europe. Some combination of these 3, and I'm not going to tell you who's going to be the head, who's going to be the tail, and who's going to be the body, but some combination of these 3 is going to come together and they're going to dominate the world. The technocrats, America, England, and Western Europe. They will dominate the world. This group here is going to dominate the world. Boy, that was a long-winded rabbit trail, wasn't it? How did I get way there from the Republicans and the Democrats? There's a comet that is now on the way to possibly strike the sun on April 4th, possibly not. Thoughts on that biblically? I suspect that there's probably stuff that slams into the sun almost every year. Most of it is so small that it escapes our notice. Occasionally, scientists will see something fairly big slam into the sun, and they'll catch pictures of it. Even if they didn't see it approaching, they'll see the explosion. And sometimes they see stuff aiming for the sun, and they're able to track it all the way in. I think in the last days, there's going to be a vast storm of comets, long period comets, that are going to bombard the Earth, Mars, Venus, all the inner planets, and bombard the sun. There's going to be a tremendous storm. And where do these pieces come from? If you trust ancient history at face value, folks, there was a time, around the time of the fall of Troy, when there was a sixth visible planet that orbited between Mars and Jupiter. The ancients saw that planet. They had 6 visible planets. Now, that planet was fighting with another one of the gods that was in an elliptical orbit. That means it was not in its normal, almost round orbit. And that planet hammered the 6th planet. This planet fractured into bajillions of pieces. Those pieces are now the asteroid belt. They are the long period comets. They are the short period comets. They are the pieces that orbit around they're the asteroids of Saturn. They're the asteroids of Jupiter, which are called Trojans. They are most of the TNOs, the trans-Neptunian objects, which are like at Pluto and beyond. They are, they're just all over the place out there. These pieces, some of these that have gone into these long period comet orbits, I think in the last days, there's going to be a whole group of them that are going to come back and create havoc here on Earth. Now, is it possible that something's going to strike the sun on April 4th? Very possibly. I'm not familiar with that particular theory. But if it does strike it, it's not necessarily biblical in the sense that it's one of the comets that we see in the book of Revelation that are specifically mentioned in the last days. But it's biblical in the sense that we've got birth pangs of the tribulation, and we have that happen after the rapture, and we have the Braxton Hicks birth pains and tribulation stage setting, which we're seeing right now prior to the rapture, and that could easily be part of it. What happens to a person who survives the tribulation but didn't take the mark and didn't accept Jesus as their Savior? This is a great question, and I am very thankful to tell you that I have a great answer. There won't be anybody who comes to the end of the tribulation who's undecided. At that point in time, everybody on the planet that is beyond the age of accountability, and that differs for people. I think some people are accountable at age 5 and some are not accountable to 8 or 10 or 12. And some are still not accountable at age of 18 because of mental deficiencies. But assuming the age of accountability, everybody on the planet is either going to take the mark of the beast or be sealed with the Holy Spirit, with the Holy Spirit of the new covenant until the day of redemption. There'll be nobody that's on the fence. That's the whole purpose of the Antichrist. The Antichrist is the great judgment of the tribulation. When you think about all the rocks that fall from heaven, you think of the ocean turning to blood, you think of the waters getting poisoned, you think of these demon creatures that come out and sting people and they wish they could die and they can't die. You got all these problems, terrifying problems. But folks, not one of those problems can take a man to hell. The only judgment in the tribulation that can take a man to hell is the great delusion of the Antichrist. And this delusion, folks, is so absolutely black darkness that nobody's going to accidentally believe it. It's not possible for any Christian or half Christian or quarter Christian to be deceived by this. It is so absolutely antithetical to the God of the Bible, to righteousness, to morality, to every institution of God, Israel, the church, Judaism, marriage, the distinction between the sexes, everything. He's so opposed to it that nobody can accidentally embrace the Antichrist. You have to intentionally and wickedly walk away from the truth, from Jesus, from the whole picture. This is not going to be the typical situation we face right now, where there's a spectrum, where that spectrum runs from very dark black to light black, to dark gray, to middle gray, to light gray, to almost white gray, to white, and then keeps going. In the tribulation, you're going to have two choices: absolute blackness under the Antichrist, or absolute brilliant light under the Spirit-baptized Jews, under the 144,000, under the two witnesses, under the angels preaching from heaven. There will be no middle ground anymore. That's going to be evaporated, and every man's going to be forced to choose. And by the time we get to the end, everybody has chosen that. So once we understand this picture of how the tribulation works, it's pretty amazing. God is going to separate every man on the planet. And there's only two choices: absolute blackness and absolute brilliance. Okay, March 3rd will be the third consecutive blood moon on Purim. Can you take a rapture out of this, or is it relevant for anything? I can't say that there's absolutely no message at all for Israel in this, folks. There might be. But I can say this: it has absolutely nothing to do with telling us that the rapture is near, or that the tribulation is insanely near. There's nothing in the Bible that would tell us we should make a correlation here. This is pure speculation. It's a relatively recent speculation. I'm not aware of this kind of teaching appearing like 50 or 100 years ago. It's possible someone brought it up, but I've just seen it from this side of the year 2000. Okay, just curious, how many eclipses and blood moons have we had in the past? Well, on average, there's approximately 2 blood moons per year. I don't remember the exact number. I can't remember. It's like 1.83 or 2.13 or something, but it's approximately 2 blood moons per year on average. Some years don't have any. Some have 3, some have 4. So on average is 2. So from the cross, we've had approximately 4,000 blood moons. None of them in the past were a sign that the tribulation was on the immediate horizon. No group of blood moons was a sign that we're on the brink of the tribulation. There's many times in the past where there's been a tetrad or 4 blood moons in a row. Many times there's been 3 in a row in a year. And sometimes these have been associated with some interesting dates in Jewish history. But that wasn't a sign of the end of the times. There might be an argument you can make that these are just a part of a broader package of God just trying to speak to the Jews in a broader way. If you want to go there, I'm not going to fault you for that. There may be something in that. Okay, my thought has always been that the signs were meant for Israel and not the church anyway. Okay. Your thought, please. Rightly dividing the word seems to have been forgotten. Yeah, as a general rule, there's no doubt about it. Signs were intended for Israel. They're an earthly people, and God has given them many earthly signs. When you look at the history of Israel in the Old Testament, you look at history of Israel all the way up to 70 AD. You look at the history of Israel during the church age when God still deals with the nation of Israel, looking forward to that day when he's going to bring them back after the rapture of the church, restore them unto himself, and deal with them as his people once again. It's pretty amazing some of the correlations you see on dates like the 9th of Av, on dates like Purim, dates like Hanukkah, and even the recurrence of things like the Rev 12 sign and the woman giving birth. I mean, these kind of things, these signs, I think have relevance for Israel. Not necessarily any relevance in the sense that there's God speaking to Israel and saying the tribulation's right now today, because a bunch of these signs happened in the past and it didn't bring that. That doesn't mean it's not a message for Israel. It just means that the message for Israel wasn't the tribulations right now. And I don't think that some of the signs we're seeing right now are a message for Israel that the tribulation's right now. But they could well be a message for Israel. When you look at that big picture, that big pattern, all the stuff that happens on the feast dates, all the things that happens on Jewish dates, there may be a story there. Yes, rightly dividing the word seems to be forgotten. May God help us. We have an obligation to be sober, to use the historical grammatical hermeneutic, to be willing to have our little theories tested objectively and discard them if they fail. It's interesting to observe how often people, they raise a cool theory, someone brings objective information to them that their math is not quite right, that they fudged a couple of the dates, that their year of the cross is not right. You bring this information and they don't respond objectively. They get mad that you think you're right and you think they're wrong and blah, blah, blah. And they don't apologize. They don't want an objective discussion. They just want you to say, it's okay if you have your theory and I have mine, and we'll just wait to see who's right. This is not iron sharpens iron, folks. That is a safe place sandbox where everyone can spout their garbage and there's no obligation to test and discern each other's teachings. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong. It's just not the way the game's played. The way the game is played is that theories should be able to be tested and proven with objective science before the supposed fulfillment date. And what I've discerned, if people would play by the rules before the discernment date, and they were playing by those rules, they would give up seeking their false states when the rules go bankrupt. But they don't. They just keep going. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 theories. They never learn. It's because they want the safe place sandbox and the excitement. They don't want science. They don't care about science. Anyway, that's me tooting my horn. All right, please explain Ezekiel 46, 16 through 18. Is this King David? And if so, how can he have sons during the millennium? So let's go to Ezekiel 46, 16 through 18. Thus says the Lord, if the prince gives a gift of some of his inheritance to any of his sons, it shall belong to his sons. It is their possession by inheritance. But if he gives a gift of some of his inheritance to one of his servants, it shall be his until the year of liberty, after which it shall return to the prince. But his inheritance shall belong to his sons, it shall become theirs. Moreover, the prince shall not take any of the people's inheritance from evicting them from their property. He shall provide an inheritance for his sons from his own property, so that none of his people may be scattered from his property. Well, I don't see any mention of David here or anything that would imply David, but is definitely talking about land rights in the kingdom. Your sons have a rights to a piece of your land. And if you give that land away or sell it, it comes back in the year of Jubilee. What are my thoughts on the Board of Peace that Trump has put together? Well, personally, I think Trump is trying to raise up his own United Nations that he's going to dominate. Whether this will fail or succeed is another question. It could succeed and go forth and overtake the UN. It could become like a whore that rides the back of the UN, rides a beast of the UN. Personally, I think the UN is a deadbeat organization that's worthless. The world would be better off without it. That said, I don't know whether the Board of Peace is just an idea that's going to have a short lifespan and morph into something else, or whether it's going to take off and take roots and grow. The time will tell. Okay. If Reza Pahlavi comes back in power over Iran, he said he sees himself as King Cyrus. Could that be the strengthening of the Abrahamic covenant? Well, possibly. More likely, there would be a parallel to the Abrahamic program with the Persian program. The Abrahamic covenant itself is simply a biblical covenant, and we don't really want to confuse that with the Abrahamic peace plan or with the Persian peace plan. I think those are different things, but I am a little skeptical that Reza Pahlavi is going to come back into power in Iran. I think that would be wonderful if that happened for the Iranian people. However, I think that we are either going to see no war in the status quo, stay in power in Israel under some kind of a faux peace agreement where Iran furtively continues her same programs, or we're going to see Iran take a beating that she'll recover from through China and Russia and recover in time for Gog and Magog. But if Iran takes a beating and someone else comes to power, I think it's much more likely that some, quote, moderates, notice how I got moderates in air quotes there, comes into power in Iran, goes through the motions of steering Iran in a direction more open to the West. They'll get trade money from the West. Restrictions will be lifted. Tons of money will flow into Iran, and she'll rearm and rebuild herself, but she'll hate Israel just as much as ever. The population on the street does not hate Israel, but the people that will be in power will be the same kind of anti-Israel people that are in power right now. So I suspect there could be a regime change, but not one that really significantly changes the regime. It'll be kind of like what we saw in Syria, where we get one bad guy out and the ones that come in power are just as bad, maybe worse. I think that's what we'll see in Iran. Okay. If the church is raptured before the Antichrist comes on the scene, to whom does Revelation 13:18 apply? Okay, great question. So let's pull up Revelation 18:13, and I will read it. Revelation 18:13 says, oh wait, 13:18, isn't it? It's 13:18. Yep, I had that dyslexic backwards. All right, 13:18. Here is wisdom. Let him who has an understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. So this is going to happen during the tribulation. In the tribulation, the nucleus of the testimony is going to be God's Israel. And then there's going to be Jewish proselytes who are going to embrace the God of Israel and be born again. Excuse me, I got to take a drink here. So this is definitely during the tribulation. All of chapter 13 is during the tribulation. Do you think that we will see a rebuilt Gaza? I absolutely do. I can't tell you how far along the rebuilding process we're going to see while we're sitting down here on earth. Maybe we'll see a significant portion of it while we're sitting up in heaven watching prophetic updates on big screen TV and drinking our Heaven Bucks coffee. But I think there's a very good chance we will see, one way or the other, see Gaza rebuilt. and America right in the thick of it. I find it interesting that one of Trump's plans is to put an American base in Gaza with 5,000 soldiers there, permanently stationed there, Fort Gaza. So this is just another indication in my mind, folks. I'll just share a little bit here. I'm not going to push it on you, just share it on you. But I personally suspect, I'm not going to be a bit surprised if America proves to be the little horn that dominates the Roman Empire. I'm not going to be a bit surprised if America proves to be Mystery Babylon in one way or the other. But just food for thought. You just look at how America is exalting itself and exerting itself in the world. We really only have one and two choices. With the America that we see, you trace that trajectory seems to go in the direction of America dominating the New World Order. Now, if that's not going to be the case, then things are going to be really ugly in the near future for America, which is what many of my prophetic allies teach. And maybe they're right. I suspect they're not, but that could well be the case. So don't get married too strongly to any one of these views. Hold it lightly, watch things develop, and we'll see what happens. Okay. In my walk of faith, if the blossoming is slow for me because of fighting battles and challenges, does that mean I won't be saved or I'm lukewarm? No, absolutely not. This is a great question. I'm glad you asked it. Everybody's growth goes slower than they want. Now, sometimes young believers in a fit of zeal, they're just so pent up with emotion and they just go like crazy. And because they're so emotionally charged, like they hardly even notice battles and they just grow like a weed. But somewhere along the line, that starts to slow down. They're not necessarily going to lose their zeal or their desire, but this huge emotional charge slows down. But everybody is going to have battles. This is going to slow them down, discourage them. They're going to be defeated at times. And sometimes people fall to really wicked sin. Sometimes people fall just to normal besetting things, like they can't control their tongue, or they get bitter, or they get angry. Sometimes they struggle with things that we think they shouldn't and that they think they shouldn't. They might struggle with alcohol or with cigarettes or something they think they shouldn't be doing, and they're really wrestling with it. So these kind of battles, folks, I don't think they prove that you're not saved. Now, if someone was indulging these things and had no conviction of sin, and if his Christian brethren challenged him and exhorted him, and he just blew up and got angry and couldn't receive it at all, there was no conscience, you might question whether they're real, okay? But when you've got believers who are grieved over their sin, they're grieved over the slowness of their growth, they're grieved over the fact that they just fallen for the 48 millionth time, it seems like. How in the world could that be a sign they're not saved? Think about it. The ungodly person doesn't grieve over the fact that he's dishonoring God. The only two people that can grieve over the fact they're dishonoring God is either a born-again Christian or a sinner who's been awakened by the Holy Spirit and he's on the road to conversion. Those are the only two people that can have that exercise. So just listen. I mean, maybe there's more here you haven't shared, but just listening to what you shared, my first thought is, dude, of course you're a believer. And it doesn't mean you're lukewarm. It just means you're in a battle, and that you just, there may be something you need to do in your walk that'll bring you closer to the Lord. Sometimes coming to victory is relatively simple in the theoretical aspect. Sometimes we simply need to spend more time in prayer. Sometimes we simply have an issue that we need to deal with that we're really not quite surrendered on. Sometimes it's we're not spending enough time in the Word. Sometimes a mixture of all three of these things. But folks, if you are born again, you are going up in the rapture, and you are not going to lose your salvation. No way under the sun. Oh, here's an interesting thought. I haven't thought of this one. If many Iranians are coming to Christ, wouldn't the rapture truly cripple Iran, causing them to beg for Russia's help, leading to Ezekiel 38 and war? No, probably not, because I suspect that most of the Iranians that are coming to the Lord are from the lower classes. They're not from the elite leading classes. There may be some there, but if they are, they'd have to really, really be Nicodemite type believers to try and mask where they're at. I don't think it'd be possible to be in the leadership structure in the media, in the universities, in the military, or in the leading economic think tanks or political think tanks, in the IRGC, in the government cabinets. I think it wouldn't be possible. So if the rapture happened and 3 million Iranians were saved and they went up, they would mostly be from the lower classes. I don't think it would afflict their military strength at all. It would probably be problematic, but I don't think it would be a huge problem. Excuse me. Okay, I have never believed the last Christian saved theory because our Lord knows the beginning from the end, but doesn't know when the last person is saved. Okay, so here's what the issue is going on here is some people think that God has a number in mind. Let's just say it's 158 million people. And when that 158th millionth person is saved, that's it. The end of the age comes, we're out of here. I think, and this is another common theory, that this is based on time, not a number. So that the church age, from whenever it starts to whenever it ends, it's a definite amount of time. When that last second happens and the clock ticks, the Lord's going to blow the rapture trumpet. And who's ever saved at that time is in the fullness of the Gentiles. So the fullness of the Gentiles is not a particular number as much as it is the fulfillment of the time of the Gentiles. It's a time thing. And the Lord may well know who's going to be the last person saved, but that would be a little bit different question. Do you think that all who take the mark will become non-human? No, I do not. It's possible that their humanity will be tainted. However, I think that the issue is going to be more that the mark is simply a mark of allegiance, and you have to take the mark if you are going to have any shot at all at getting the extra privileges. If they have that advanced technology ready for certain elite in society, they'll have the privilege of taking shots that'll lengthen their life, increase their health. Of course, this stuff is, who knows what's going to be, animal DNA, plant DNA, Nephilim DNA, whatever it's going to be bad stuff. But I don't think that stuff is going to be intrinsically in the shot. Could be, but I don't think it is. I think all those extra privileges are only for people that take the shot, and it's going to be only for the elite. Now, here's another interesting question. Why do the Antichrist and the false prophet go straight to the lake of fire rather than the great white throne judgment? Because they're not human. They're obviously going to have some human blood in them, but they are so much Nephilim blood in them that they are no longer responding in any way that resembles a human being. I think when you have those high amounts of Nephilimic blood in you, you're not capable of being saved. That's how wicked you are. Now, I personally think that most people who take the mark will still be human beings, maybe all of them. And they're going to stand at the great white throne judgment and be judged as human beings. The ones that have become non-human are not going to go to the great white throne judgment. If they are truly Nephilimic, not trace amounts of this stuff like some German and Norwegian peoples have 6 fingers and 6 toes. That's just trace stuff. Nothing that the rapture and the resurrection can't fix. But if you're truly of that other bloodline, when you die, you go to the abyss. You don't go to Hades, and you are not going to the great white throne judgment. You're going to be raised again with Satan for the little season, and then you're going to be cast in a lake of fire without the great white throne judgment. Okay. Where does the Bible specify a 7-year tribulation? I can see a 7-year agreement, Matthew 24. Jesus calls it the beginning of sorrows and the great tribulation. Yeah, this question comes up quite a bit, and I understand why people go there, but it's a hyper-technical question. Folks, if the second half of the tribulation is great tribulation, that implies that the first half of the tribulation is called tribulation. It's legitimate to call it tribulation. I think the whole time is a time of Jacob's trouble. It's the whole time of Jacob's sorrow. It's a time of testing for the nation of Israel. The whole time is an hour of trial for the whole world. So if we're going to really be technical and go with the details, I think the tribulation is going to start. Both the day of the Lord and the tribulation are going to start the moment the rapture happens. That's the morning star. The rapture is the morning star. That's the morning star of the day of the Lord. From that moment on, the dawning of the day is marching upon the world. The rapture is the first sign the day of the Lord's coming. As far as I'm concerned, the day of the Lord and the tribulation are synonymous. I think they're both going on for a little ways before the first seal is opened. I think the first seal is going to be opened itself before the 7 years begins. So the 7 years begin with the treaty. And it doesn't really matter which version of this treaty you think, whether the Antichrist forces a treaty on Israel or the Antichrist gives Israel a treaty which allows them to do their covenant, whatever version you're going to think this is. But so the 7 years starts after the opening of the first seal, because the Antichrist is not going to come to power at 8 o'clock in the morning, and at 8:45 in the morning is going to sign that treaty or force that treaty on Israel. So it's before the 70th week starts, the Antichrist comes to power. Before the Antichrist comes to power, you've got the Gog and Magog juggernaut battles. And before that, you have the morning star of the day of the Lord, which is the rapture. So in a technical sense, I think the whole period of time from the morning star to the second coming is the day of the Lord, is the tribulation. The 70th week is the 70th week. And the second half of the 70th week is called the Great Tribulation, because it will be the worst tribulation in the history of the world. But I think it's perfectly legitimate to call the entire 70th week tribulation. And I think it's perfectly legitimate to regard the entire time following the rapture to the second coming as the tribulation. I try and understand people's terminology here, and I don't try and get too critical about their terminology, because it's more important the content of what they believe than the terminology that they use. Okay. Do Matthew 24:37-39 and Luke 17:26 through 27, speaking of just daily life going on in the days of Noah, or do they include other things like the presence of the Nephilim? Thank you. That's a great question. First of all, I think the primary focus is simply the world is going to be going about relative normality, oblivious to the fact that judgment is hanging over their heads. I think The second thing that's part of this picture is it implies the enormous iniquity that's going to be in the world, perversion. But it also implies, I think, that behind that perversion will be the same Nephilim problem that we had in the flood. There may not be as many Nephilim mingled here on earth, but there will be Nephilim. And they are secretly, I think they're here right now. I think they're the deep state is many Nephilim in it. I think the Illuminati deep state has been preserving these Illuminati bloodlines for many, many centuries. They dominate the world. At any rate, I suspect that they're still here and they're pushing their perversions on the world. They hate God. They hate the Bible. They hate Israel. They hate the church. They hate the Jews. They hate Jesus Christ. They hate blood atonement. And it's just a mess. Okay. I missed question 18. In question 18, is Damascus going to be burnt to the ground before the Ezekiel 38 war? It's possible. Some of my friends think so. I am inclined to find the simplest solution that fits all the data. The simplest solution for me is Ezekiel 38 and 39 and Psalm 83 and the destruction of Damascus all happen at the same time. It's just really all the same event. Russia is going to lead that big main juggernaut. Syria is going to be leading the jihadist branch of this whole operation. And then Damascus is going to get absolutely destroyed, not by a judgment from man, but fire from heaven. And so will the Psalm 83 armies and the juggernaut armies. Okay, that's the end of the questions for tonight, folks. Thank you very much. We had a great turnout tonight. Looks like we have 685 at the high point here. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the great questions. And thank you very much, folks, for asking good questions. It's really a blessing. I've come to the point where I love this Q&A part, and it's interesting to me that we often see the numbers that are attending increase in the Q&A rather than decrease in the Q&A. And I want to thank my moderators very much too for their great help. This room would not work quite the same way without their help. And hey, Ron, I'm going to say hi to a few people. I've known Ron W. Jr. since he was a little boy. So his dad and I have been good friends for many, many years. And his former pastor and I are some of the best friends on earth. I also see some other folks in here that I actually personally know. So thank you. Thank you for showing up. Oh, I'm trying to make these cursors go so I can see stuff in the chat, and I don't know how to do it. So I think I'm just not really good at tech. I was going to try and scroll in my chat here, and I just can't get it to go. It's not working. Oh, here we go. I just have to use this cursor. I thought I saw my buddy Jeff in here somewhere too. Yep, Jeff Reagan. I met Jeff Reagan when we were on the East Coast a couple years back. I see a lot of names in here that have been attending my live streams for a long time. All right, folks. Thank you very much for showing up. I'm going to wind things up. I got to go to bed tonight. Got a big day tomorrow morning. Tomorrow after lunch, we're flying to, flying to Detroit. And then from Detroit, we get picked up and we're across the border into Ontario. And I have a big conference there. It'll be a wonderful time. I'm going to be with Nathan Jones and Tim Moore from Lamb and Lion. Be with Mark Henry and be with a few other brothers whose names I don't recognize. But folks, take care. God bless, and keep me in your prayers.